of the Special Charter Review Committee. It's January 29th, 2024, 5 p.m. We are located in the hearing room at One Government Center in Fall River. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any media. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And at this time, we'll open it up for public comment. And everybody should have received some suggested language for charter enforcement violation and penalties. They were sent in the email. They were also, I think, posted by IT on the website. So we're referring to, in the old charter, or the new one, 914, I believe. I will. 914 is titled Enforcement of Charter Provisions. And right now it reads, "It shall be the duty of the mayor to see that the charter is faithfully followed and that all city agencies and city employees comply with the provisions. Whenever it appears to the mayor that a city agency or employee is failing to follow the charter, the mayor shall in writing cause notice to be given to such agency or city employee directing compliance with the charter. If it shall appear to the city council that the mayor personally is not following the charter, the city council shall by resolution direct the attention of the mayor to those areas in which it believes there is a failure to comply with the charter. The procedures made available in 231A of the general laws may be used to determine the rights, duties, status, or other legal relations arising under the charter, including any question of construction or validity which may be involved in such determination in order to promote enforcement of the charter provisions." This is actually, I'm not reading the old charter, I'm reading how we had updated it up till now. Let me make that correction. This is not the current original charter language, this was our updated language. In order to promote enforcement of the charter provisions, a 3-member grievance committee shall be established. 1 member of the committee shall be appointed by the mayor, 1 by the city council, 1 by the school committee. At such meeting, there'll be an opportunity for public comment, and the committee will produce a written report concerning each alleged charter violation. That I just wrote is what we had voted on to be the new enforcement of charter provisions. However, you would have received in your email like 5 or 6 pages, and it's titled 914 Enforcement of the Charter Provisions. It's 8 pages of very detailed procedure, how the Charter Compliance Commission is established, what their procedure is for violations, and then potential penalties. And I think there was some discussion that one of the biggest problems with the charter is it doesn't have any penalties written in for violations of the charter, and we didn't really delineate a procedure for that. So I attached those pages as public input, but is there any other public comment? Was there anything else that you want, did you want to address?
Basically what you're saying.
Okay.
The only thing I got to say is if you don't enforce this charter.
You know the procedure, Mr. Venice. You come
Maybe I
up,
don't have anything to say.
name, age, rank. No, not age, rank, but you know what I mean.
Augie Venice, 25 Wrights Way, Fall River, Mass. I think it's important that we get some enforcement of the charter. Everybody's interpreted the charter different ways. And, we gotta go ahead. I know we talked about a grievance committee. I think at one time I suggested getting a grievance committee together. I think this is calling for it. I put some language together, 914.
Mm-hmm.
I also submitted documents from Reading, Pennsylvania, that had their charter committee. They gotta go to the city law department and establish a charter committee by ordinance. They have a charter integrity officer that unfortunately is paid, you know, to oversee the charter and the enforcement of the charter. They have a, you know, they recommend a committee. On my old thing, the 914, I recommended a 3-member committee, but I don't think that's enough. I think it should go to 5. Keep it at an odd number, but go to 5. You know, all these things that I've read, you know, say a formation and put together somebody in charge of it that becomes a regular city employee, but I don't think we should have to do that. I think we could go into the law department and either get a city solicitor or assistant city solicitor or some lawyer in there to be head of that, because certainly there's gonna be legal issues that have to be addressed by somebody that knows the law. And, you know, do that, or even that personnel director or whoever's in charge of personnel, maybe that should be. But I think, you know, if we don't get any enforcement of the charter, then, you know, you might as well pound the gavel tonight and call it a year, because seen what happened the last time around. Something happens, you get an unfavorable decision, and then nobody follows the charter. I recently spoke with a higher up in the city administration, and I complained about, in addition to this committee that you have, there's supposed to be another committee to review the ordinances of the city. And he said, oh, you know what a job that is? And I said, yeah, the stack of ordinances, there's 40,000 ordinances. The book of ordinances is about this high. I said, but the charter requires it. He said, we'll see what we can do. And just ignored it. And there's no punishments, there's no penalties. I mean, there's things in there that have to be outdated. I know Mike Mioza in the last charter, well, the current charter, they reviewed it, and what he did was he picked out every time the charter was mentioned. He said charter of 1980 or whatever, you know, he just, you know, replaced it with the current charter, the current date. But I firmly believe that, you know, we got to start enforcing these things. We got a lot of, you know, we got the charter, we got code of ethics, we got, you know, different other things that have to be enforced, and people are just doing willy-nilly what they want. And, you know, I appreciate going back and reviewing this.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Venus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
very briefly,
please.
thank you.
I thought you were saying thank you to me.
No, I was saying thank you to you, Mr. Venus, and I'm thanking Dan for being brief.
I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was another committee that was charged with reviewing the ordinances. Former City Councilor Mike Mioza was on it. Former City Councilor Eric Poulin. Former City Councilor Pat Casey. And several other people. Allison Brett, the current, now Allison Bouchard, the current city clerk, was on that committee. So at least once, that committee was formed. They reviewed the ordinances. It may have even been before or while the original Charter Commission was doing its business. I'm not sure if they're required to meet so many years every time the charter is updated, but that committee was formed. They did sit. They had a number of meetings. Those meetings were televised, just like every one of the 27 or 30 charter committee meetings of the original Charter Commission was televised. They're out there on Facebook. People can go back and see the laborious efforts of the original Charter Commission. All our meetings are televised. They're all out there for people to see. And so, a lot of this is not new. I feel like some of it is getting rehashed because people didn't get, for whatever reason, because they couldn't get the magic number of votes to get it in the original charter. Now, they wanna rehash 5,000 points, 5 to 7 years later. So I think we should judiciously complete our work, send our reports in, and complete the process. What happened in 2017 was a different animal. I wish the document of 2017 never passed, because I think it's an unmitigated human disaster. But it passed overwhelmingly by the committee, by a vote of 8-1, and was endorsed by the voters of the city of Fall River. So that's it. I yield, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Seeing no more public comment, attendance, please, starting on my right. Is that my right? You're on my right.
Dan Robillard.
Paul Machado.
Marina Brown,
Kathy Nankovich.
Tracy Almeida.
Mimi Larrabee.
John Mitchell.
Laura Sampson.
all right.
Yeah.
Not Laura W.
I had to remember that.
Let the record reflect it is now Laura Sampson.
Yeah.
Thank you. And moving along, I want to ask everybody, I did seek an opinion from the city clerk as well as Corporation Counsel regarding the use of the term officer throughout the charter. I am not gonna quote every section that has it, but the long and short of it is, Corporation Counsel, the city clerk said, listen, nobody is titled an officer. Even the chief financial person is called the chief financial, it's not chief financial, it's called director of financial services. So the city clerk assured me that there is no job title, that officer is part of that job title. Corporation Counsel said, the clerk's correct, the city officer simply means a department head. His recommendation is the use of city officer is confusing and should, in his opinion, be removed, since the term officer in other parts of the code typically refer to a president, chairperson, clerk, or a secretary of a board. That said, do I have a motion regarding the word officer?
Move to strike officer anywhere in the charter.
Second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Robillard to remove the term officer, seconded by Mimi Larrabee. Any other discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Everybody okay? Okay. Motion passes to remove the word officer throughout the charter. And then my notes. Okay. Before we start on going right through this from front to back, is there any place right now that a committee member wants to go right to?
No, I'm not sure on the number, it's on my other one that I had notes on at home.
We were talking
I
about
grabbed-
the prohibition.
Yeah, so, the one with the school committee and, overstepping. Okay, I'm in the middle of speaking with somebody about it.
Right.
I actually have the book in my bag right now, but it might take me a couple more days to take care of that one, so I will.
Just to make the record clear, we're talking about section 2-3
That's
on
what it was.
prohibitions, but that prohibition section occurs under city council, mayor, and school committee. And it talks about no former member of the city council or school committee shall hold any compensated appointed city position until 1 year following date on which the former member's service on the city council has been terminated. There are exceptions and exemptions written to other charters, and we're checking with Mass General Law 268, which is the ethics general laws from Massachusetts, and we're checking on the internal, overstepping in an ethics of the school committee, because there was some suggestion to add an exemption in that, prohibition chapter.
Right.
All right?
An exemption for what?
To that 1 year to be considered for, a different city position. Like if you served on the city council and there's an opening in the maintenance department, or, you know, anything. There are some charters that have written in exemptions, and somehow they do the language that it doesn't conflict with the state laws on ethics. Mimi was checking with the internal school committee stuff, so.
Yeah,
We can absolutely go back to it if there's strict language.
okay.
I just started reading Mass General Law 268A because that is the whole Massachusetts Code of Ethics. And I can tell you this.
Right, I have it right, I have the book.
Right.
I started just going through the whole thing.
And a lot of that prohibition really comes from financial gain, which would be financial gain if you got
Right.
an employment. But it talks about like using your former position in a manner that exploits the position you had with the money you want to make. And we were kind of talking more about if a qualified candidate before that year came up, at least had an opportunity to apply and be considered like other candidates.
But like we said, qualified was the pertinent
Qualified was
word.
the operating word.
Right.
And we talked about adding a supermajority.
Right.
And all that, so we gotta finish reviewing the ethics, but
Can I just get the
Yeah.
statutory site?
Mass General Law, oh, what, in the charter or Mass General Law?
No, that you were just talking about.
Mass General Law 268A, Chapter 268, capital A. Lays out all of the Massachusetts conflict of interest and ethical general laws.
Yeah.
Is that currently referenced in the charter?
It isn't, and that was the other thing. I wanted to be able, under
Yeah,
prohibitions,
it's right here, I have it.
to reference it, so, because I think the conflict of interest has to be referenced in the prohibition chapters of the charter.
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion that, the prohibition sections reference the Mass General Law 268A. That's my motion.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
before I decide whether I'm gonna say, we're not voting right now.
To change it,
To change.
but we are voting to absolutely add the reference.
Okay, but this vote does not modify in any way that 1 year exclusion.
No.
Thank
My
you.
motion is just this. The title of Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, is titled Conduct of Public Officials and Employees. I think that the prohibition portion of the charter, there's 3 prohibitions in here, mayor, school committee, and council. My motion is only to reference Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Conduct of Public Officials and Employees.
Second.
Motion made. Any further discussion on that reference? On that motion, sorry. All in favor of referencing MGL 268A? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion unanimously passes that the prohibition sections will reference.
And I'm assuming, I'm not familiar with the statute, but my guess is that there is some penalties that within the statute?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. It
so-
lays out the definitions, it lays out all the laws pertaining to it, and it lays out the penalties and procedures for violating 268A.
Does any,
So,
do
as a
you,
result of referencing it, then we don't have to specify
right,
the procedures and the penalties
Correct.
within the charter.
Correct.
I just have one question for
Mhm.
clarification. The last meeting, we discussed merging the prohibitions into one section. Did
Into
we
one
vote-
section.
Did we vote on that?
We didn't.
Okay,
So-
That was the abuse of power prohibition,
Thought we did
because,
a long time
Right.
ago.
Across the
because
board.
Well-
what Nina was looking
Right.
into was
Right.
section four
Well, we
dash
said
seven,
Four dash-
interference with
right.
administration,
Right.
which is different than,
Right.
different, but then we were also talking about the individual prohibition sections like two dash
Yeah.
three A and all that, so there's
Right.
multiple sections that we were
Right.
saying to put into one new section,
And
right?
we did talk about it in the past, cause my notes say
Right.
that we should mirror the language across all three sections. That's what my notes
Correct.
say, and we did that, Dan's right, some time ago. We did not, however, talk about merging them until last week.
Right.
And I didn't know if we took a vote on that or not.
So, just to make the record clear, we're discussing section 2-3, section, hang on, 4-3, and hang on,
4-7.
and 4-7, because here's the problem. They title, in 2-3 and 4-3, they title it prohibitions. 4-7 titles it interference with administration. They're two separate things. And we couldn't figure out why they titled it separately.
There's another section too, though.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's section 3-1
Three,
D,
what is it?
3-1 D.
And 3-1D, right. So 2-3, 3-1D, and 4-3 are all prohibitions. 3-1D is mayor, 2-3 is council, and 4-3 is school committee. Those are the prohibition articles and sections for those positions. 4-7 is interference. And interference is somewhat differently than prohibitions. The language is different. Like, the interference says you can't order, if you're an elected official, you can't order an employee around. And there was a discussion that if you took that interference literally, it means that if Councilor Washington had a question during budget time of a department head, Sampson,
Counselor
Yeah.
I would like to know how many hours of overtime, can you get that for me? She would not be able to make that request, because
As an elected
interference,
official, she-
not, she absolutely
This
could
only
not.
applies to
They
the
make
school
those
committee, though.
requests every
Right.
2 weeks.
Then the interference says that they can't order or direct them.
Is there another provision like this for the city council?
Hang on, so.
think
I don't
there's
think
one
we
for
found-
the
That
school
last
committee.
one about.
And the reason for the school
interference.
committee is ed reform. No one can tell
Right,
an employee but a superintendent or principal. I mean, I agree with you, the language is not
right, the language was,
too
so,
broad to me, but
right,
the intent
4-7.
is,
4-7 was
You
the school
can't tell a
committee or
teacher
any
to
member
clean up
near,
the room.
shall not give orders or directions to any employee of the school department. But there's another interference written into the council one as well.
there
In
is
2-3,
Yeah.
it's 2-3B,
3?
Yes,
is interference with administration for the city council,
right.
or
Every-
any member.
Our problem with it was, it says, except for employees appointed in accordance with Article 2-8, the city council or any member shall not give orders or directions to any employee of the city, either publicly or privately. So if Counselor Sampson called up somebody in the water department and said, you know, I wanna know how many gallons of water the city hall is using, can you get that number for me? She can't, according to that.
We can't.
Now, right, so there was discussion to change the language in this interference of administration to allow for the inquiry in the furtherance of the city councilor's, you know, performance during budget time or whatever. 'Cause if you take that literally, every time they pick up the phone and ask, can you get me the numbers for, that's a directive or an order, right?
Well,
Well, then
don't know.
couldn't we just add,
I think you should, I don't really see that, I'm sorry.
For data, I don't see that. For a request, can you get me something that's gonna personally
Yeah.
benefit me? I don't think asking for,
Right,
City
my
data
notes,
would
I
be-
just thought about adding, this does not preclude a city councilor from from inquiring of an employee or department head information necessary related to the performance of the city council.
Yeah,
That's all.
I think
I mean,
it's
I just thought that it was open,
Yeah, I think it's,
It is open.
yeah, I think it's open.
but
That
if we
whole-
just clarify that they certainly can.
Yeah.
City council is questioning department heads on a bi-weekly basis. There's also, and I can't quote the section right now, but there's also, a section somewhere in that article that says, councilors must put their questions in writing
Well-
before a meeting, which is absolutely absurd.
Well, that's when they invite people down. So, getting back to the two issues.
Right. Okay.
I certainly think if we put one prohibition section and list the prohibitions in there, instead of having 3 under each one.
Yeah, can you
I
make that in
mean,
form
that
of a
was the
motion?
discussion.
Can we make that in a form of a motion and get that, see it done?
And that should be in section 2.3.
2, 3, well,
Well, it's
2,
the first time
2
it's been
dash 3,
mentioned.
3 dash 1D, and 4 dash 3. Those are the 3, mayor, council, school committee.
And if we merge them, where should they go?
They should go in one big prohibition, maybe on,
But as what part?
I-
What section? Leave it in section 2 somewhere?
Article 5, administrative organization. Not 6, 6 is fire, school capital. 7 is elections. 8, no. 8, and, how about 9, general provisions?
Okay. Why can't we just leave it in section 2?
It's because it does deal with the executive branch, right? Is that considered the executive branch in total?
Yeah, it's a legislative branch, so it's just,
Council.
Why not
Yeah.
in 9, under general provisions? They have limit of office holding, certificate of election, the felony convictions is in
Uh-huh.
9?
yeah.
Why not do a 9 dash anything and add it in 9? It looks like 9 is the catch-all, inspection of documents, conflict of interest, public comment, rules or policies.
General provisions.
9
yeah.
seems to be the catch-all of everything we didn't put in the previous articles.
And take them out of prohibition.
And take the prohibitions out of those, have one prohibition article, it'd be like 9-15 prohibitions, and then you list it.
Yeah. I
I'll make a motion.
We have to renumber all the other ones.
Well, yeah, he doesn't mind that renumbering, right? So the motion is just not referring, interfering, just, creating a new 9-17, 18, it would be,
20, 9-20.
depending, well, we
20.
took some out, so it'd be 9-20. My motion is that 9-20 be the prohibition article and section. And in that, we include the language that's in 2.3, 3.1D, and 4.3. Though the prohibitions, on all those, on the legislative, the mayor, the executive, and the school committee. Right? That make sense?
Under general provisions,
Under
correct?
general provisions, it's under, yeah.
9-20.
Article 9 is general provisions.
Yep, I got it.
I mean, we could make it 9-1
Right,
and make it the
notes.
first one. We don't have to put it at the end. I don't even really want to put a number on it, because we certainly want, maybe we make it 9-1, because it is an important provision, right? And then we change the number of everything else, or we add it at the end. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to get along.
Yeah.
Not 9.0 or 9-0.
What's easier for you?
I'll second that motion, even though it's gonna make some work for me.
More discussion on moving the prohibitions to its own article division Any more discussion on that?
I don't understand why we just can't leave it as it is. There's a prohibition on the legislative section, which is Article 2, the executive, which is Article 3, and the school committee, which is Article 4. Put the same language in all three articles and leave it alone.
Well, and then we can incorporate that interference with administration and clean it up. Because really, it's a prohibition, you can't order employees around. But you should be able to ask them questions in the furtherance of your,
It seems that the language is repetitive, and since it's repetitive, and we voted to mirror it, it makes sense to put it into one. I would be for putting it into one for clarity.
and I mean, right,
But
If
it's
it's gonna
gonna
say exactly the
reference,
same thing,
it's
then.
gonna reference the mayor,
Oh,
city
right.
council,
I
school
think
committee.
it makes the prohibitions clear to the public as well, without them having to go
Get
through
three
it
different
for.
sections.
And for the same exact, if the language differed, I'd agree with Dan and say, yes, we would need specific sections that outline the behaviors or prohibitions for each of the people we're talking about. But that's not the case. We voted to mirror the language.
right.
That's already passed. Since we've voted to mirror the language, it makes sense to consolidate them.
And we talked last time about, paid committee members too. And I mean, I think it's like 9-20 prohibitions, mayor, school committee, council, right? 9-920 b, paid committee members and this, because they are going to follow that same prohibition. And then 920C is where we incorporate that interference with administration. No paid employee, unless you're a department head, can order or direct. I mean, no elected official. However, that doesn't preclude the normal requesting of information in the furtherance of their duties, right? City Councilor Sampson wants to know how many gallons of water the city hall uses.
That could be fairly subjective, though, and open
Yep.
to interpretation, if you use that kind of language, so I would worry
Right.
about that. If it was,
Oh, right, I mean, I don't mean that exact language, but that was our problem with that interference. We thought it should go somewhere near that prohibition.
yes, yes, because
But
it
didn't
guides,
we-
it guides behavior,
I'm sorry.
no.
Didn't we just talk about adding a sentence
Yeah.
to the prohibition that this does not preclude
That makes sense.
inquiries?
Didn't we vote on that?
We didn't
No.
vote on it.
I don't think so.
Can you make a motion?
All right, there's a motion on the table.
Motion on the table.
There's a motion on the table, made by me, seconded by
Paul,
Paul,
What was the motion?
to take those three sections of prohibition, make them one in general provisions.
So,
That's just,
Put it-
that's the
make
only
it
motion on the
920.
table right now.
and make it
9:20.
9-20, right?
Right,
9-20.
9-20, okay.
all right. Any further discussion on that?
Well, yes, we're not changing.
Interference?
Yeah, okay, not
no.
yet, not yet.
We're just
okay.
talking about taking all the prohibitions, making them
Okay.
one article. Any further discussion? All in favor? You want a roll call vote now?
Yeah.
All right, roll call vote. I'll start down on the left.
yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
No,
motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 8. I gotta count, because I'm not good at math. All right? And then interference of administration. Do we leave it there, or just add the sentence, it doesn't preclude an elected official from inquiring?
to whom?
Like requesting documents, like, what
To
if she?
whom?
Right.
I mean, it just, I don't think.
Well,
you-
the language here, I should read it. 4-7 is interference with administration.
Yep. School committee.
But it's referenced, not just in 4-7, but where was the other one, Pat?
2-3B.
I just think it should be taken out. It's
2-3B.
Yeah, it is meaning.
I mean, job descriptions tell people who they report to. To take away from a counselor the right to call a department head and say, Rena Brown's sewer's backed up, get down there. I mean, technically, that's not appropriate by this, but
No.
I
And it
assume
violates the
still happens all the
ethics
time.
rules anyways. I mean, and it violates the
Republicans
ethics.
made a living on that stuff.
Well, it's part of your
Of
job.
course it is.
I mean, to say,
Constituency
yeah.
service 101.
Wait, so you, what's part of the, I'm confused, go ahead.
Well, part of your job is, you get, I'm sure you get calls, my kid wants to go to Tansy
Yep.
instead of wherever.
Mhm.
This says you can't do that, because it says direction or order. And
Right.
all these things are protected by, Ed Reform's gonna allow you to call, but you can't decide, the
Right.
superintendent, if he
Right.
doesn't care about his contract, can tell
Right.
you, I'm not doing
Okay.
it enough, so
So-
you get sick of it.
We're agreeing,
And the same with the city council.
Right.
It's, you're always getting calls about,
always.
you know, this problem, call a dog officer,
Right.
you know, people don't know about animal control.
So,
I just think, take it out. These.
I like the idea of taking it out
Yeah.
instead of writing in a
Yeah.
preclusion.
right,
It's easier. And the other
only
thing
thing-
is 268A, the Mass General Law, the one that we're
speaks,
referencing.
but that's why I
speaks
went
to
to that,
this.
that's why I went to that, because I went bigger
Well, that's
than just
referenced in
this.
here anyways. That's in section 9, there's a provision about 268A.
Right.
So, but that's what my point is, there's so many other protections, you don't need it in the charter. I
Right.
mean, someone's job description, the union contract tells them who they have to listen to.
Right.
I mean, I don't think all the time I was on the council, anyone I called ran down and did something right away. Some mayors had, you know, certainly a strong policy that if a councilor called, you better let them know they were calling. I don't know if that's still the case,
And what,
but
who's them?
if any councilor called the
So we're
department
talking
head or
about
department, they were told to call the
2-3.
mayor's office.
Small
I don't know
b.
if that's still the
Right.
case. The
So-
idea being it should be somewhat centralized, and
So school committee, so this is just, I mean, if anybody calls us, if there's an issue or complaint, I mean, the first thing we're supposed to do is just call the superintendent and say, look into this, this came to my desk, I don't wanna overstep, here you go.
And how do you know that, Mimi? Where is that said?
I wanna say the ethics,
That's
and,
something that's covered in like.
but that's why if we're gonna change this, if we're gonna change this, it should say that our direct line is, so the city council, if somebody calls the city council, does it go to the president? Somebody calls the school committee, does it go to the superintendent? Nobody should be out there stepping on toes, right? So if a situation does come to us, a lot of the time they're valid, right? So do we call the principal? Do we call the teacher? Do we call whomever? No, we should just report it right to the superintendent. That's the line that we follow on the school committee end.
Right, you guys
I can't
have-
really
yeah.
speak for your side, but
I mean, poor Charlie Denby has to deal with me calling him all the time because a constituent calls me and says, you know, there's, you know, sidewalk that's ripped up in front of my house, it's a tripping hazard, or there's lights out in my, you know, neighborhood. I don't
Right.
call Charlie and say, hey, get down and, hey, can, you know, is it possible for you to
Right.
take a look at that?
that's the approach.
You know, like, it's not, I don't never give him a directive, it's not my job, I'm not his boss, I just can ask a question,
I like the idea of taking it right out.
yeah.
I'm not opposed unless it's stated somewhere else that it's followed, and I don't see it
I understand what
anywhere.
you're saying though. I can see me.
You
I
follow things the way I follow.
Yeah,
There
like,
may
I
be
have-
somebody that is an elected official
Has poor
that
boundaries.
doesn't follow that code of, let's say, respect.
Yeah.
And I
but
think,
they're still elected officials. They should have the right to go to whomever they want.
That's absolutely
And-
right.
I
That's why we
mean,
do
everyone
line
shouldn't just
council.
fall into, that's why you got 9 and 7.
Yeah, but we were
Um,
talking about the distinction of inquiries. This provision sends a message that, hey, you don't interfere. It's,
Right.
you may be an elected official, but your role is not to interfere with employees. And I think that's good because we have seen some elected officials who overstep their bounds.
Yeah.
And that could happen again.
Yeah, I have to backtrack a little bit and say that me personally, you call it respect, call it boundaries. I know my place, I know my role. I am not anybody's boss. I'm very happy when someone, you know, helps with a question I may
Yep.
have. But someone may take that and think that they have some power and control and just start ordering people around, and they have nothing to fall back on.
well, and if, maybe they just don't know, too. And so they're creating their own rules because it's not spelled out. So it needs to be spelled out somewhere. It
Well,
protects-
it is in the
protects
ethics.
It protects the council member, the school committee member.
And the
It protects
employee.
everybody. Yeah.
And the employee.
The
It protects
poor
both.
employee.
As
Two
a,
with 9 of us.
as an elected official, I would imagine they would like to know exactly where the line is, so they can, if it's not spelled out anywhere, that leaves it up for interpretation, that's where you can get into trouble.
Well, we have to take the ethics class online.
Yes.
And I believe it is mentioned in there. But again,
taken
if
that
my
class.
memory,
Yeah, for this, we took it to be on this.
I think we did, yeah, actually. And I have to take it again
The
because we just
ethics
got
class.
We just
reelected.
got- yeah.
Yes.
But again, I think if I remember correctly, I think it's a little vague.
It's a lot big.
Yes, so that's,
Intentionally, I would imagine.
I don't wanna say I don't have a stance on it. I think if we're going to make a stance on it, it has to be very clear.
Well, 2.3, small b,
Yep,
it's only, this interference of administration is only mentioned twice in the charter. 2.3b,
and
interference
4.7,
with the.
yes, and 4.7.
Except for employees appointed in accordance with Article 2.8, the city council or any member of the city council shall not give orders or directions to any employee of the city, either publicly or privately. I guess if I marry somebody that's an employee of the city, I can't tell him to take out the garbage.
I
No,
know,
but
I know.
mean,
because
that
you-
language
I-
is
I-
troublesome
yes.
to me.
Yeah. Right.
So, I just don't think that you need to, I think it's an ethical violation if Laura calls up as a city councilor and calls Charlie Denman and says, hey, and make sure my garbage gets picked up first, I think she's in trouble with the ethics of
If it's
that.
personal gain.
But that's an unusual thing. What it's more concerns me is when she calls and says, Mrs. Smith down the street's garbage hasn't been picked up for 5 days, go get it. Is that something you call the mayor about?
No.
You know, there's just so much that goes on.
Exactly,
Right.
like,
And I just think this is protected in so many other ways, I guess by the ethics,
I'm
I'm not so
with you,
sure.
I think it's the ethics.
But you've got a union contract,
Yep.
you've got job descriptions, you know, you got just people's courtesy.
Yep.
I mean, no one's out looking for
They're
these
discussing it
problems.
still,
I
No,
mean,
Dan.
You know,
No,
when the
right,
20th
no
person
motion.
calls about
No
their
motion, they're
kid's
discussing.
MCAS score or something, you must be ready to say, I give, but,
Mr. Mitchell, you ready to make a motion?
yeah, take it out.
2.3, small b, so, Mr.
Yeah.
Mitchell Attorney Mitchell made a motion
Second.
to
Both of them.
strike 2.3b and 4.7, seconded by Dan R. Any further discussion to strike those two interference with administration clauses? All in favor, we'll do a roll call vote.
I just wanna ask,
No,
I'm
go
not,
ahead.
I'm just. I just
It's
have-
only 2 spots,
there's
it's
only-
just the
there's-
2.
Right,
I'm just wondering why it's in there in the first place.
because I think that
Because the
probably,
consultant told us.
Because
to
the
put it in.
consultant told him to put it in there, and it, like other sections, they wanted a check and balance, but I
But I
just think
think-
the pendulum swings the other way.
right, and if it's not there,
Let's stop
The,
city
um,
council from going
you're
to the
right.
employee and say, hey, stop what you're doing and do this.
but they don't have,
That's
but
what
they're
it is.
protected in their own, and what your argument is that they're protected in their own job description, their own,
Union
Their own-
negotiations,
I never liked this language and argued for it,
okay.
yeah.
argued against
Right,
it.
they don't have to
25
drop what they're doing for someone to call and.
Right,
Right, okay.
and you'd be
It's not enough
subject
getting
to
them to
some,
do anything, no matter
right,
what
and
you
you'd be
want.
subject to an ethical violation
And
if you had them come in and jump at your beck and call too. I mean, that's the other problem, is I think the code of ethics covers that.
Well, just if
Well,
it's your
so-
own, but
If
that's,
she calls up DPW and says, drop me off a load of gravel, you know, everybody's in
well,
trouble.
that's a crime.
Well, that's a
Well,
crime, that's, I mean.
Rather
I mean,
rather
that's,
than removing the section, couldn't it just be reworded to, you know, include some mention of the code of ethics?
No, because I don't think the code
think
of
it
ethics
comes right
covers
out.
anything but
doesn't.
perhaps an individual doing it for themselves. And what I'm concerned about is more someone down the street calls you, that's your job.
I think it's
Yeah.
just
And I just think
verbose.
elected officials should have some leeway. I mean, this
Yeah.
idea that everyone's running around lining their pocket, doing this and that.
No, I agree with that.
Most of them are just, they're giving up a lot of themselves to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's time, it's energy.
I don't necessarily think of, for me personally, the people lining their pockets. I just think for the way the employees could be spoken to at times, and that's what I'm thinking of. But who are you my boss? Who's my boss? You know, like, where is the boundaries? But I guess you're right. I mean, if someone talked to me,
It
you're not gonna
goes
get
on
very far.
anyways,
If it,
yeah.
yeah, it does.
And my,
it-
my problem with it is, it's vague, it's
Yeah.
ambiguous, it's open to interpretation.
It
If
is.
you took that literally, you know, I just, it's.
Well, that
it's-
language wouldn't allow you to ask the water department to give you a list of
That's
right, and I
right.
have
who
a
haven't
problem with that.
paid,
And
or
yeah,
how many gallons were pumped last
right.
month.
And I have a problem with that.
It's just so
Not
broad.
getting that information.
And not getting that
Right.
information, like if
Right.
I, for anything, but I call very, like, you know, I know, first of all, I don't call all the time, but if I need something, it's always in a form of a question, could you, is this
Not,
okay?
right, so, but it's not in order or direction, right?
So
That-
there
that's
is
what I
a
mean. It's
motion on
more-
the table made by Mr. Mitchell, seconded by Dan, to strike 2.3 small b and 4.7. And any more discussion? Roll call vote, starting on my left. Laura, yea or nay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1, 7 yeas, 1 nay. Okay. I'm gonna take some notes out on 129. That is 2.3, small b, and 4.7. 2.3, small b. Out on 129.
can we revert back
Go
quickly?
ahead. To prohibitions?
4-7, no, 4-7, yeah.
It's
I
not there
guess.
anymore. Sorry, too late.
That's hilarious. So what is, I am the absolute worst school committee member ever.
Nice,
right?
on the record.
So on the record, I am
That,
terrible.
so your
So-
election time, that's gonna be a nice little soundbite.
Yeah, it's
Being
fantastic,
clipped
right?
right now
I'm
as
the
we
worst.
speak.
Yeah, they're cutting that right out.
Beautiful.
So, something goes wrong in one of the schools, and it just so happens to be with a principal that I just didn't approve with their hiring, right? I didn't approve that hiring. Not that I would have to, because it's not under my purview. That's the superintendent's purview, but I
Correct.
didn't agree with it the whole night out, all right? So now, I have to call that, I want to call that principal, and now I call that principal, because I'm not saying it's me, I'm saying it's that school committee member. I mean, that isn't so doesn't have ethics, right? And they call, and I want a list of this, and a list of this, and a list of that, to prove that that didn't happen in this school. Where is that verbiage that states that can't happen if we take this out?
So you, as a school committee member, want a list of, I don't know, like
Whatever.
privileged information? I don't know if
Not
you
so
get it.
much.
I think you guys have your own rules on that.
You can get that information.
Get any information you want.
Through the superintendent,
Or through a FOIA request. I mean,
through the superintendent, right, but that's what I mean, you shouldn't be calling,
We can't police every motive, every unhappy person.
right, and I voted yes.
There's gonna be,
People, the voters and
There's
the
gonna
other
be
council
people
members
out
would
to
have
get
to
other
decide
people.
on whether or not, right?
Right,
And so, and then the principal that was the subject of this inquiry
right,
would be perhaps talking about it publicly.
right, and I'm
And
just,
that may hurt your chances for reelection. Or this-
Right,
Or
right.
this particular committee's
Right,
members'
right.
chance for reelection.
like, I'm just,
So I would imagine people will check themselves if they believe that that information might be distributed publicly. But it's within your right to ask for it as a school committee member.
the superintendent,
You could ask the superintendent, but can you make direct requests? or you can't. It must be through.
You guys have school committee rules, you better go read that rule book
That
again. You are
is-
the school committee
Well,
member.
I,
In section 4-5, the school committee shall have all powers which are conferred on school committees by the general laws and the additional powers and duties provided by charter, ordinance, or otherwise, and not inconsistent with the general laws. What's general laws?
so,
I did not think that you had to go through the super, I don't think it's written anywhere. You can go into any school at any time and get any information, cause I've done it with other
Yeah.
school committee members. I've walked through without, I mean, there was
Right.
no approval.
no,
Not
no, I
that-
go through schools all the time.
Right.
I talk to them, I ask them questions,
But you hadn't cleared that with the superintendent. That would
always
be-
do,
Yeah,
always do.
why?
Hey, superintendent, I'm going to this school today.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because the school committee has its own policies and procedures.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have
That's
to, I have
why.
to go back.
She
And I'm getting
operates
lost.
under a completely
Yeah.
different set of policies and procedures.
And ethics, yeah,
than-
there's some
and
ethics that
ethics
differ
than a,
as
than a
well.
city councilor.
So they supersede because they go beyond the extent.
Yeah.
Yes, they
Yes.
can enlarge on the protections, but they can't, infringe.
And I'm not even saying that I could be the only school committee member that reaches out to the superintendent and says, hey, I'm gonna go see Doran today. Would you like to
Everything
come?
has to
Blah, blah.
go through the superintendent according to their policies and procedures.
Yes,
That I know, because although I
Right.
didn't campaign, I read up on what they had to
Right,
do, couldn't do it, and I
right.
went, I can't do
And
this,
that-
I'll just wanna pick up the phone.
but anyway, so I voted
Okay.
yes, but I just want to chat quick.
Thank you.
I'm
for
still
that
yes.
Clarification.
I'm still yes.
And
Too much to regulate,
Too much to regulate.
too much to regulate.
too many different people.
I had a question, under 2.4 compensation B, expenses, subject to appropriation, the council members shall be entitled to reimbursement of their actual and necessary expenses in the performance of their duties. Actual and necessary expenses shall be defined within the council's rules and regulations. Do they require invoices submitted for that, Madam Counselor?
No, it's a strict salary,
I-
right?
Is,
Yeah.
I,
Mhm.
no, I'm,
It's
it's say,
just a
no, I,
bi-weekly salary.
not their salary, I'm on B, under expenses.
Oh,
4-4?
Do they have to submit invoices for expenses?
I've never had it.
You've never had to submit an invoice?
I've never submitted an invoice for an
Okay.
expense.
I've never
I
either.
just didn't know, I wanted to add language, I wanna see the invoices.
well, they would be public, you'd have to
Yeah.
submit them, but.
I don't know what
Okay.
expense I would have.
Alrighty,
I would never.
Right?
I wanted to add, they have
Yeah,
to
no,
submit
I
an
mean,
invoice.
Yeah.
I wanted that language in the charter. I wanted to add, all actual and necessary expenses shall be accompanied by the corresponding invoice.
Well, they
I-
have to get it paid through.
They have to,
Yeah.
alrighty
The
then,
city would
then we
never
don't
pay
have to
a
add
bill
it.
without-
Right.
An invoice,
Okay.
I didn't submit.
University,
invoice
when
or
we submit
something.
expenses through the university for travel and so forth
Yeah,
related to our
that's what I
jobs,
would think.
we must heavily
Yeah, we
document
don't-
and request permission.
Us too, and we don't get reimbursed if we don't have the proper
I mean, what do I say? Hey,
documentation.
wanna give me $20? Spent some gas money. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Really,
I
Laura?
think
All right.
it's more if
Yeah.
you
It
went
can't
to.
be
I
the
wanna
honors
direct
or
your
something.
attention to sections 2.7B, access to information, because I was thinking about this, and I think it needed more language, and I think Dan just brought it up. 2.7, access to information B, is information requests. It reads, the city council may require a member of a multi-member body, department head or city employee to appear before the city council to give any information that the city council may require in relation to the municipal services, functions, powers, or duties which are within the scope of responsibility for that person. The city council may request budget-related information concerning the school department. I wanted to add the request to appear before the council shall be written, either email, correspondence, and shall contain a brief summary of the information or inquiry. I have watched council meetings where they have invited somebody down, and because they don't know exactly what they're gonna ask, this is the answer. I don't have that information on me right now, can I get back to you? And I think that they could avoid a lot of wasting the time when they invite somebody to come down to speak, if the written request to appear has what I'm gonna ask you about. And I know Dan just mentioned it, they're supposed to be sending written requests. When they want the mayor or corporation council or the department heads down, those are supposed to be written. I know that they don't always comply, but on this information request, I think that we should think about adding the request to appear before the council shall be in writing, either email or correspondence, and shall contain a brief summary of the information of the inquiry.
Isn't that indeed,
Indeed, but it's a different
It's a
related to that,
different-
But we could use that same language.
Right.
It says the resolution shall include the subject on which the city council seeks information, and instead of may, we should put should contain specific questions prepared by the council.
Yeah,
I have
go
two
ahead.
things.
Yes.
A, 27B, was like a direct conflict of what we just took out, strike, because this is saying, something may require a member of a city employee to do anything, would, is.
No, it's
like a
just talking
direct-
about
No, I'm just saying-
information. It's just talking
Well,
about.
I'm just saying, to me, it's a conflict of what we just took out, so I'm glad we strike that
Yeah,
out,
because
because
you're
it's,
ordering people
you're
to be
asking
there.
someone to do
Right,
something.
that's what I mean. That's why we
So
took
it's-
out it
yeah, it's a
interferes
direct
with
conflict, so
administration.
I'm
Right,
glad I stuck that, but
Right.
let me just say this.
yeah.
I caution that because sometimes you get questions out of things that were just presented to you. So you ask someone to come down,
Right.
and then more questions appear. So am I not going to be able to ask a question that just didn't make sense to me because it wasn't put on
It's
the
not
thing
put in
sent
the
to you?
paper.
I got a problem with that because
No, but-
sometimes more
right.
information comes down, and I want
Yeah.
to be able to ask what I need to ask.
That's a good point.
You don't have to
But
put
at least
specific
give them, though, the
questions, a
topic
brief
of the-
summary.
Like, why are you requesting them to come?
Right, like, I just want a brief
Like
summary of
related
why they're coming
topics,
down,
right.
of related topics. I mean, more often than not, then they sit at the table, the council asks questions, and this is the answer. I don't have that information with me right now. If they had known that question was coming,
Well,
it would give them a minute to be prepared.
I'm just gonna go back.
Right.
With it doesn't just say, we're gonna have, the water department come down and talk to us. Usually it's followed by, we're asking the water department to come down regarding the water on Fountain Street gutter situation. I don't know what it is. So there's a little brief of something
Right,
there.
right. Oh,
Now,
So,
there's
but do
always,
they send written requests to them?
I would have to check with the city council, but the city council requests them by call and usually an email. That they get a request of what they need. It gets usually in a resolution from us to them, okay? So, but, again, I go back to, sometimes they don't have the answers to the questions because, questions come up and you're
Right.
questioning something that they said. So no matter how many questions you have, if you're asking them something that just came to light, it's very easy for someone to say, oh, I don't have the answer to that. No matter what you put on that letter, what you put on before, well, now you know, go back and get the information.
No, I get all that. It's just that the whole, this is how I see it, if you can follow my crazy logic. The charter is the law of Fall River.
Yeah.
And the charter is supposed to guide departments, legislative, the mayor, the school committee, and other departments. They're guidelines for how things should be done. They're guidelines that we look for direction. And my problem is, that B doesn't say anything about letting them know anything that you want. And I don't like the idea of calling a department head down, and them not being, I think it makes everybody look bad if they don't know what's coming at them. All I want is some kind of written summary to them, because I always feel that sometimes they come down there and, I don't think it's intentional, I won't say it's intentional, but then they start looking like that they're not doing their job or they're not competent at their job. Because they don't even, they might not know why they're there.
Sometimes what I think, I
Did that make sense?
So, yeah, well, sometimes they waive the rules and they ask someone to come down for a question that's on the floor. So, Seth, the city administrator, sometimes he doesn't know because can I waive the rules? Can he come down and answer? I don't know. I didn't know. You were going to ask that question. But when a person is invited to come down before the city council to answer some questions, it is regarding a situation that we have asked them to come down. So they know what it's for. Department heads just now, we're going to, interrogate, a department for no reason. They know what it's in regards to. So, you can feel what you want to say, add language to that, and maybe we should pause that while we ask exactly what the city council clerk does and what language she
Right.
gives. But she does.
But see, B is different than D. That's what I'm saying. B encompasses everybody. Whereas D, it only says a department head or employee of the city. I thought that they sounded different, and why were they different? See, B and D, two different, same thing. Again, a charter with a lot of
Because,
language
alright.
in it that we could clean up. The council should be able to ask anybody to come down at any time. I'm just saying, if that's what we're gonna do, let's have it in writing, give them a brief synopsis
Yes.
in a minute. You wanna waive the rules and call upstairs and have the mayor come down while you're doing something, that's, the council, I guess, can do that. But I'm talking about 2.7B and D seem to be the same thing. Why it has all those words in it, I don't know. Follow me?
Yeah.
I wanna get rid of one.
So,
I only
don't
want
know if
one.
it-
I only want one invitation.
Can I talk to, I think they are two separate things, and maybe I'm different. I'd like to talk to the clerk, because I know I just filed a resolution to have some people come down before me of a city department. So that resolution had to go through the city council, we had to vote, you know, if they were, you know, everyone wanted them to come down, and, okay, everyone voted, we want to come down. Now,
So-
sometimes some of the council ask for information request.
So 2.7B and D, you're gonna try to find out if there's a difference between
there
those
a
two.
difference? 'Cause I'm
Because
not a veteran
both
council.
are
I haven't
talking
been-
about the city council
Yeah.
asking somebody to come down to answer questions. If we can have less of these duplicitous
Yes.
paragraphs, then so be it.
I'm all about less is more.
Right.
Sometimes, okay, but I don't wanna make sure that we're not taking out something that needs to be in there.
Right, that's all I'm saying. So you're gonna, Laura to check on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as I'm concerned, it's all the same thing. You're asking somebody to come down to answer questions. I don't care if it's budget, services, it should just all be one way, the same way, right? If that makes sense?
Well, B and D, I mean, D is just stating that it's the notice, exactly what you're saying. It says in it, the resolution shall include the subject on which the city council seeks information.
Yeah, but then B doesn't say anything about
Right.
the school department.
Right,
and D
because
has
that's
the s-
just-
School department in there.
Right.
So, I just think that we could do all of that with one paragraph, cause I don't know if there's a difference.
Why this too, right.
Why is there two? Yes?
I mean, it doesn't look, I'm sorry, it doesn't look like information requests have to be written requests, like D.
Right, I
Right.
kinda
Because-
think that they should be written.
Right.
But sometimes and I think you're gonna limit yourself to that, because sometimes you need information to clarify something of discussion that's happening, and you're asking a department head, you're asking the city administrator to come down and see if he's got the answer. and
Well,
9
that
times out of
doesn't,
10 he
that doesn't
does.
preclude the council from waiving the rules, making a phone call and asking them to come down.
How do you know? I mean, if you're gonna take out,
Because you can write that in there. Nothing precludes, the charter isn't gonna override the council's right to pursue the answer. I just think you have two paragraphs that say the same thing, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
How's it function now? Okay?
I mean, I think it functions fine right
You
now.
could if you do this, you could potentially hamstring the ability of the city councilor
Yeah.
to ask a department head questions from the floor. Most of the time, there's resolutions put in.
Yeah.
The resolutions, the scope of which, and the court reads every resolution into the record,
Yeah.
so it's not a secret. The resolutions are pretty thorough, but I also think, and I've done this sitting on other boards, when someone is before you, something comes up, you have a right, as far as I'm concerned, if a department head is down there, once they're before the council, a councilor ought to have the right to discuss anything that's within the purview of that department head. I mean, that's their job. If they know their position, they know their job, they ought to be able to have a discussion about anything under the jurisdiction of the person that's before them. And to try to limit that because we didn't put it in paragraph 3, line 4 of the resolution, I think is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
Any more? You're gonna find out though what the difference is between those
I'll
two.
find out what the
Yeah.
difference, if there, yeah,
If there is.
if there's, I'll just get
Um,
clarification.
I have notes that we were gonna visit 9-7, and I wanted to point this out. We struck officers from everywhere, but this one defines what officers are in reference to chair, vice chair, secretary, and clerk. It needs to stay there. They just define it.
Right.
9-7. See the uniform procedures governing multi-member bodies. That officers needs to change because they're just saying each committee is gonna elect those positions. Or do we name it committee positions? I mean, I don't know. You follow me? We took officers
The
out
officers of
everywhere.
any committee.
Right.
It's the leadership in any committee or board.
Right, but we voted to take officers out. It's there, but it's in there in reference to the leadership positions of committees.
Yep.
Right, so I think it's fine to leave it in.
To leave that one in.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, all right. You don't need a motion to do all that or fix the other motion. We're all set. So that officers, because that stays, because that,
Like, for example, we did here, is we selected a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary.
mhm,
And then later on, Tim was appointed as
Co-secretary.
co-clerk.
co-clerk or co-secretary. So that would be any other officer.
Right. I think so.
Right.
I believe there's language in there that says every board or multiple member body has to have a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk in some form.
Mhm.
I can't quote you the language and page number, but I bet it's there.
And then 9-14, enforcement of the charter positions.
Yeah, we need to revisit
We
that.
need to revisit that.
Madam Chair, just a
Yeah.
point of information.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did put in a grievance committee, right?
Yeah, our new one just had, in order to promote enforcement of the charter provisions, a 3-member grievance committee shall be
I
established.
just wanted to make sure, because we heard a little bit about that tonight.
Yeah.
In public input, and
Yes.
I wasn't sure what the gentleman was.
But,
But I think though,
Go ahead.
I think it's obvious that we're missing key elements, like,
Yeah.
what's the term?
Mm-hmm.
right,
How often do they meet, like,
yeah, the
They
whole
only
thing.
meet when there's a grievance, when there's an issue.
Right, but I think we should codify it in the charter. I think, like, is it a form, do they send, like, they have to send a written statement, there's a lot that we could put in there, and then we never write penalties. Look, at each meeting, there'll be an opportunity for public comment, the committee will produce a written report concerning each alleged charter violation, but then we don't have a charter violation penalty portion. The documents that you got in the email, I'll read you some of the penalties. Cease and desist from doing whatever it is you're doing that's violating the charter, come into compliance, and they take into factors depending on what the penalty is. You can just admonish somebody, or public censure, criminal prosecution, imposition of $1,000 fine or other fine, refer to law enforcement, stuff like that. And the documents I sent you talk about people that come and testify for a charter complaint shouldn't be penalized. Let's say a teacher says the superintendent violated the charter, the grievance committee doesn't find a violation, and the teacher gets her walking papers, and they come up with something. So I think this enforcement of the charter provision needs to be expanded to include how we form the committee. We have in here where they come from, mayor, school committee, city council, right? But how is a complaint filed? Are we gonna have a written form? Do they just write a statement? I think Rena violated 6.2.
Who's gonna enforce it? That's the
Right.
question.
That's
Well,
what she's
that's the
saying,
other
yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
is that the documents I sent in the email have like an 8-page, who enforces it, how,
But the cities only have limited penalties they can impose,
right.
very limited.
Well, if the
So-
charter outlines penalties,
No,
Can't-
but I mean by state law,
right,
you know, municipalities are limited in how much they can fine, what they can, if any, I don't know that they can criminalize anything. I think it's basically by fine.
Do you know what provision you're talking about, John?
I believe it's part of the home rule statute. You know, just like we can't establish elections or, you know, do other things that the state's preempted. That's my recollection.
so
but-
it might be in the home rule petition,
Well, no, there's a section in the municipal law provision of the general laws
Mhm.
that restricts, just prohibits municipalities from, we can't, other than the authority they give us to tax, we can't tax. And, trying to think of some of the others. You know, there's just a whole series where we're not allowed to,
In
Act.
other words, you couldn't create your own penalty.
well, no, we can. There's some authority for municipalities to, you can enforce your ordinances. There's provisions in the ordinances how you enforce them.
yeah.
But a lot of the authority comes from the state. You
So
know,
we
like
should probably-
conservation, most of that comes through the state legislation.
So we should probably familiarize ourselves with that statute?
If we wanna put penalties in here, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different areas, zoning, I mean, I think 40A has provisions in there if there's violations and stuff, so. Pardon me?
Probably have to draft an ordinance for the code enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different provisions, there's various penalties, but,
Mass General Law 43, I think that's where the home rule petition is, municipal law unit. Well, the other thing is, whatever we finish doing, it goes to the AG's office, and they review it for, conflicts with Mass state law. Let's say we wrote a penalty provision in here, and we said, all right, it's the 5th time the mayor's violated the charter, 6th time we're gonna fine him, and we put that in here. When they get it, they're gonna send it back either, alrighty, it's within your purview, or no, it doesn't, so, but, I mean, we don't have the procedure in there. I mean, in the next email, the next meeting is February 26th. There's a sample form, I think that came with this Pennsylvania one. Mr. Venice did the research on it, and it's a charter complaint form. And, you know, your name, your address, what you think they violated, who violated it, and you submit it. And I like the idea of a form.
Who do you submit it to?
To the
grievance?
charter grievance committee, right, because, you know, we're gonna our charter's gonna form some kind of committee to review the grievances, right?
Right now, how is that process done?
There is none.
it's not,
Well, it's not, there's nothing.
you go to
In-
court,
In the,
So you have
like
to
they
file
did
it
on
with the
those
Right.
3 or 4 cases,
in
yeah.
the charter we have, in this
Yeah, we're saying-
charter that we're using,
It says the mayor shall enforce the charter, that's what it says somewhere in here.
Yep, section
But-
914 just says that,
Yeah, but we
He has the
changed-
water
we-
board
We
upstairs.
said about.
we changed it,
Mayor and
because,
all elected officials.
yeah, we added all elected officials. The way it stands now, although it does, the way it stands now, 914 enforcement of charter provisions, it'll be the duty of the mayor, we added elected officials. I think it should be any resident, well, it's their duty to enforce it, but anybody can file a complaint. It'll be the duty of the mayor to see that the charter is faithfully followed and that all city agencies and city employees comply with the provision. Whenever it appears that to the mayor that a city agency or employee is failing to follow the charter, the mayor shall in writing cause notice to be given to the city agency or employee directing compliance. If it shall appear to the city council that the mayor is not personally following charter, city council shall, by resolution, direct the attention of the mayor to those areas they believe there's a failure to comply with the charter. These procedures are available in chapter 231 of the general laws, may be used to determine the rights, duties, status, or other legal relations arising under the charter, including any question of construction or validity which may be involved in such determination. So it references Mass General Law, Chapter 231A. 231A. I'll send that in an email to everybody, all right?
Madam Chair, I have to be excused, so.
Mr. Mitchell, we appreciate you being here. We're wrapping up
Thank you.
soon, I'm sure anyways.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Good seeing everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night, John.
Bye-bye.
So I will, I'll get 231A and send it, but I absolutely think, you know, one of the comments regularly made is that, big deal, we have a charter.
Who's gonna enforce it?
Correct.
Where's the teeth? Right.
Correct. And I think charter enforcement should include, the whole spiel. How the charter enforcement committee or charter grievance, however you wanna title it, how we form them, how a complaint is made, where does the complaint do? What do you do when those three people get the complaint? How long should they have? And what happens if they find a violation? And I do think that, you know, public censure is public censure, but, I mean, we've had violations. I'm gonna tell you the most irritating charter violation that I'm concerned with is the city council, a number of years ago, demanded that the superintendent appear before them. Not for budget, not for in further service, city services provided. They demanded he come before them.
There
And he,
was a legal thing going on, that's all
There
I'm
wa-
gonna say.
right,
There
but
was-
they
Yeah, but
didn't
it
have,
doesn't-
but according to the
Doesn't matter.
charter, I don't care why.
Yeah.
According to the charter, they don't have the authorization. And they just kept doing it, and they wasted hours and hours and hours doing something that the charter clearly said they could not do. They cannot interfere with school department business. The only thing they can do is talk about the budget with the school department, not about personnel issues, not about legal issues, and nothing got done. Nobody, you know, so you're right. I think that there needs to be something.
Well, in Mr. Venice's public comment earlier, he mentioned that this is done sometimes even by a paid position. Not that I would be in necessarily favor of a singular position that did just that, but it should be part of somebody's duties, as part of their job, to oversee and enforce the charter as a city employee, but not the mayor.
That
Right.
the mayor
Because
is,
it's a
right
it
now
seems
is
to be a conflict of
responsible
I
as
think it's
the
a
chief
conflict. I've always
executive.
thought it was a conflict of interest.
And so how
You
do
can't
you-
hold one political
Person.
person in charge of,
Right, to others, and vice versa.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
we evened it out, it's
I would
okay, so.
hesitate to put penalties in.
I've always
If
said,
they're not
But I
it should be a
satisfied
paid,
with the
I've
grievance
always said it should be a paid
go to
position.
court.
I don't know.
It should be, not a.
No, I think you could
agree,
put penalties
part of
in.
somebody's
I think
job.
public
You can do whatever you
censure,
want.
Just gonna
I
be- are they
think,
gonna sit
I
out there
think
waiting?
that,
What kind of
Maybe.
penalties, like monetary?
well,
There
it
you
isn't the
go.
law department, it's the Attorney General's municipal law
agree with
department
that.
that'll tell us whether it's in violation of any mass state laws.
You said something a while ago, Madam Chair, that brought me back to the original charter commission. At the end, the final charter went to the AG's office. They said everything was okay. And as we know, there was at least 3 or 4 provisions struck down by the court. Yet the AG said everything was kosher.
Well, I'm gonna tell you why. They don't tell you it's kosher. They don't take your charter and make grammatical corrections or tell you everything's okay. They look at it for one thing. Is the passages contained in your charter in violation of state law?
Okay.
That's all they do. And actually, when they review it, they don't send it back to you with corrections and they don't send it back to you with recommendations.
They send it
They-
back with nothing.
They send it back with nothing.
They make
So,
recommendations.
you know, listen, I don't think that anybody is ever gonna come up with a foolproof document that can't be legally challenged. Any lawyer will tell you, you can sue for anything you want. Whether you're gonna prevail or not is a whole different story. I don't think we're ever gonna be able to, I don't think anybody's gonna be able to fashion a charter that isn't subject to some kind of challenge.
And nor should there ever be a document. like
Right.
that.
But the AG's office only looks at a document for one thing,
State law.
state law. And the decisions that came down, I'm surprised that they didn't catch the Hetzler stuff, because that was kind of a constitutional law issue, right?
I saw that coming.
Right? I mean, that was really your right to
Run.
seek office. So I know, I'm a little like, how did they not catch that? Because it was a constitutional law violation. I just don't think that anybody's ever gonna create a document that doesn't, it can't be legally challenged.
I mean, sure, you can put penalties in. I'm saying for me,
Right.
I would hesitate to support penalties. I think if there's a grievance committee and the complainants are not satisfied, your next step is court.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is, you know, which is costly too. So there's the other thing. Who bears the costs of legal challenges to charter violations?
Who's ever filing the complaint?
But
Who-
then you also leave it to the committee, you leave it to the court to decide how to impugn.
Yeah, I mean, cause I was gonna say, who's gonna enforce the,
They're gonna have to make up their own.
yeah, who's gonna enforce the penalties?
What, and there are,
You
there are
got
none.
penalties in there, $5,000, who's gonna enforce that?
Well, when you get a parking ticket, who enforces it?
The parking ticket people.
Right, so, and they get their authority to do that somewhere.
Yeah, so, but
Like each city and town, if you put, I put a TV out for somebody to pick up, and they didn't pick it up. And I got a little paper from DPW, and they said, hey, you're gonna pay us or appeal it, so I appeal it. I mean, every division of government in a municipal has the authority to impose fines.
Yeah, but,
Right?
so, excuse my ignorance, but if, the Charter Review Commission now says, yeah, I think that they violated the charter here. And the mayor, whoever's sitting at the time says, no, I didn't. Yeah, you did. Now I pay you $10,000. No, I didn't do it. It's gonna go to court anyway, so
Well, there's rights of appeal written into any penalty. You cannot get a penalty without some kind of appeal.
I'm just saying that could be even more costly than just going to court and letting the courts decide what those penalties are gonna be. It's just,
Well, I would expect that most of the grievances would be, okay, Mayor,
That's a
you,
compliance.
Mayor, you violated the charter. We find that you violated the charter when you did this. There's not necessarily a penalty that's gonna be attached to that. It's going to be a finding telling the mayor, you violated the charter.
charter,
Right.
right.
So what prevents him from violating again?
So they would have to undo what he or she did.
Right.
she.
If
Most
it
of the
could.
time, it's
He or
get
she.
into
He or she.
compliance.
Right. And if
Okay.
Get
not,
into compliance.
right, I agree with
Normally, the
that, and all
penalty
that
is
stuff.
Where is
So
it? He's
I
not
Get
here.
into compliance.
I agree with get into
Timmy.
compliance, or we're taking you to court. I mean, I just feel like the court should determine that
And that the grievance committee should not
Impose the penalty.
penalties, yes.
Well, they gotta impose some kind of finding.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, I think they
Finding
should.
is
A yes or no?
A finding is not, yeah, not a penalty.
Well, but if we codify the penalties, I mean, I'm not talking about off the rip, you get a $1,000 fine. I'm
Well, I'm
talking
just
like, it's
saying
gonna
that-
be like your fifth or sixth
You got a-
violation of the
You got a
charter.
written warning the
Like,
first time,
for
I don't know.
instance,
I
the
wouldn't
current
be
charter
comfortable.
says the ordinances need to be reviewed every few years, and they haven't been forever.
Yeah.
There's a violation of the charter. The grievance committee would get it and say, geez, you're right, the ordinance haven't been reviewed. They rip off findings. Dear Mayor and City Council, you guys haven't reviewed these ordinances in 150 years.
Yep.
Please come into compliance.
Yeah.
And what happens?
And you got 60 days to figure it out.
And what happens if he doesn't?
And then you give them a timeline, hey, you got the next 6 months to come into compliance, get your ordinance committee together and get them reviewing it. I mean, if it's an ongoing, like that is, like, there hasn't even been any steps to have an ordinance committee, right?
Well, we have to check the statute. We have to check
Right,
the
you have to check
statute to
231.
see what we are allowed
Allowed to do.
to impose.
I
I
agree.
think that most of the violations are gonna be like, say, the open meeting law
I
violation,
agree.
Yeah,
you know, which is,
Completely
okay.
agree, Paul.
Yeah.
you made a mistake, don't do it
don't,
again.
don't do it again.
All
What's
I'm
that
wondering
penalty?
is, it,
Maybe it, I don't.
what happens if the party says no, or whatever?
Or says yes and then doesn't do it, like
Right.
continues to be.
That's what I said, and what
what
happens when they do it
Well,
again?
Then it's continuing bad press.
Well, they get a public admonishment, a public censor, and then you hit them with a fine. I mean, everybody acts right when it costs them
Check
money.
the statute.
I'd be
Right.
I don't know.
Check the statute.
Okay.
I don't know if you can. I mean, I think people would be more hesitant to go to court
$2 million.
than get hit with a fine. That's
Are
what I'm
there
thinking.
any sanctions imposed for the open meeting law violations?
I've never seen it.
I know on our end that
There can be fines, and I only know that because I
Right.
heard
we can get fined on school committee.
Mr. Higgins talk about.
Never seen it
fines.
happen.
All right, well,
Maybe we
You
can
know-
have Mr. Higgins
He
let
can
us
come
know.
down.
I
We
mean,
can
Attorney
send a
Assad
written request
usually
to
has
Mr.
to
Higgins.
respond, you know.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I've never heard of anybody getting fined, but I imagine there's fines there.
But that's imposed by statute,
Mm-hmm.
the open meeting law statute. So I'm not sure we have a
Right.
statute that authorizes penalties.
But you listen, if you violate the
We'll check it
Constitution
out.
of the United
Check it
States, it's the law of the land, you are either exposed to civil rights violations or criminally, right? Any violation of the
We'll have to do
Constitution
some legal research. I
Yeah.
think it's, chapter 43,
is the home rule petition.
yeah, so we can look at that and see,
Yeah.
you know, what
The
kind of
penalties for it.
So we've got a lot of legal research to do.
Right.
Thank goodness we have
We have some lawyers.
There are 12 lawyers on this committee.
Is there a motion?
I make sure, motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on adjournment? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is allowed, 6:30. Listen, our next meetings are 2/26. And by then, Paul will have almost 4 weeks, right? I
Yeah,
think we
I'm
almost got a
behind.